Welcome back to News in Focus. Now, allegations of President Cyril Ramaphosa's instruction being ignored on a recent Navy drill will now be investigated by a board appointed by the Defense Minister. Judge Bernard Ngoepe will lead the investigation into Iran's involvement in the exercise, which was titled The Will for Peace. And now, last month, the country participated in the drill, which was held off the west coast of Cape Town, despite the president ordering that they withdraw. That, of course, meaning South Africa, and, of course, asking for South Africa not to participate in any naval drills with Iran. This, of course, comes as tensions between Iran and especially the United States seem to be at an all-time high. Now, naval drills are an opportunity for countries to be familiar with their allies and train with them. Now, earlier this month, Defense Minister Bernard Ngoepe announced that an investigation into the exercise Will for Peace and allegations of this will now be investigated. Now, there's also another part of this which we'll discuss in the next segment, because this very same board of inquiry into the participations of the Brics Naval exercise could face legal challenges. Now, this is down to, of course, the Defense Act, which limits board membership to serving military personnel. Joining me now to take this discussion forward, I'd like to welcome Advocate Pikkie Greef, who is from the South African National Defence Union. Advocate Greef, absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. I think, Advocate Greef, let's go to sort of the genesis of everything, because as per the Constitution, which gives President Ramaphosa the title of Commander-in-Chief, this means that he and he alone needs to have the sort of understanding of who's participating in any Navy exercises, whether it's on the sea, whether it's an Army exercise. And he would give, of course, the sort of approval for this to happen. Am I stand to be corrected in that?
No, exactly. The president is the commander-in-chief of the SANDF. And obviously, when South Africa gets involved with other countries in military exercises and so on, then obviously he's at the top of the chain of command. And so anything that he orders down the chain of command should be executed.
Which means that when we come to think of it, especially with regards to Defense Minister Bernard Ngoepe, if we are to believe what has happened in terms of her allowing for the Iranians to be participating in this defense drill, this is seen as some sort of, and I'm trying to find the more milder term, a sort of insubordination in the request that came from the president.
I think we must just be very clear on what is being investigated. The terms of reference, as far as we understand it, is that the investigation is into allegations that a presidential order was not obeyed. So at this stage, it's still speculation. What needs to be proved is that there was, in fact, such an order, what the content of that order was, who it was given to, and whether, in fact, it was obeyed or not. And I think that's the purpose of the investigation.
So of course, as you mentioned, this board of this inquiry, they need to, of course, find out how the sort of lack of communication occurred between the president and the Defense Ministry, Defense Department, and of course the Navy of South Africa. Is that where we are in terms of trying to find a way of getting to the crux of this?
Oh, definitely. I think there's two parts to this case. Number one is, let's leave aside for a moment the third parties that are involved, like Iran and other countries. And let's just focus on the second part, which is basically what we're talking about here, is the civilian control over the defense force, which is a constitutionally enshrined principle. And so it is worth, and definitely, in fact, it requires an investigation when there's allegations that civilian control might have been thwarted. And it's really worth a look at the facts there, get the facts together, and then make a finding and let the law, follow on the facts.
You mentioned civilian control. Talk to us about that, Advocate Greef, because probably it's something that I've, for the first time, have come across, and probably many of our viewers. Speak to us with regards to that. When you say civilian control, can you summarize that for us, especially when it comes to the National Defense Force, the Navy, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, it basically means that the military, in terms of the constitution, cannot just operate on its own. It needs to account to the public structures that have been created by the constitution, such as Parliament and the Portfolio Committee on Defence. And so the military doesn't operate in a vacuum. It can only operate so long as it reports back to and is permitted to by the Parliament and by the President through the Parliament of South Africa. And that's in a nutshell what civilian control is about. That's also why there's a civilian component in the Department of Defense called the Secretariat for Defense. And the Secretariat's job is to write policy, determine policy, establish policy. And the chief SNDF's part, the Defense Forces part, is to execute that policy that was created by the civilian section.
From the South African National Defence Force Union, Advocate Greef, what is it that your organization's hoping for to come out of this? Because obviously this is seen as a very testing time for South Africa, and probably a time where, given what we are seeing now, especially in the Middle East, where you've got the US potentially wanting to strike Iran, the threats that are going on. At this moment, of course, both nations are still in negotiations or trying to get to some sort of negotiations. So from a Sando perspective, what is it that you're hoping to see come out of this, given that these are really serious allegations, especially given where we are in terms of our Navy and in terms of the defense force of our country?
If we want a military that people can depend upon, then it's very, very important that the military is projected and shows itself to be a disciplined force and a force with integrity. And so if these allegations in some or other way are proven to be true, that is really a serious problem. And then those persons would need to be dealt with, because it's very important, and that's what we hope the investigation will arrive at, is to preserve the integrity and discipline of the Defence Force and civilian control over the Defence Force. And we're not looking for any specific outcome here. All we're saying is, as long as all the facts are examined and a coherent conclusion is made, which we believe is quite possible given the panel that was appointed, then we can preserve the integrity and the discipline of the SANDF.
After the break, I continue my conversation with Advocate Pikkie Greef, because we're going to be speaking on the sort of legal aspects of this, because before this inquiry even begins, there could be potential legal challenges that are going to present itself. And just having a closer look with regards to the Defence Act and how this limits board membership to serving military personnel. And of course, this also raises the question about the appointment of retired Judge Ngoepe as the chairperson. Do stay tuned. My conversation continues. Welcome back to News in Focus. I'm still in conversation with Advocate Pikkie Greef, who's from the South African National Defence Union. Again, thank you so much for staying with us, Advocate Greef. So, Advocate Greef, there could be a potential sort of stop towards this inquiry beginning. In terms of the Defence Act, and of course it's an article I also picked up and on the City Press, where there could be a potential sort of hurdle for this inquiry to begin. Talk to us about that, especially with regards to the Defence Act.
Section 101, subsection 4 of the Defence Act determines that boards of inquiry should be comprised of persons in the employ of the DoD. So it can be a civilian person also in the Secretariat or a serving member of the SNDF. And it leaves no room for any other appointments. So that obviously it raised the question over the weekend once the board was announced as to how do these retired judges and the one retired SNDF member who has been appointed to the board, how do they fit into the description of this or the requirements of this article section that I referred to. Maybe that can be cleared up by the Department of Defense. It might be that the minister can co-opt those persons into the employ of the department for a specific period and a specific purpose, such as the board. It's not quite clear what's happened there. And so there is a bit of a question mark hanging around those legalities.
So my understanding of this, Advocate Greef, is that you've mentioned, of course, the subsection of the Defence Act. So there has to be employees that are coming from the Department of Defense to serve on these boards in terms of an inquiry, if I stand to be corrected.
Exactly.
Okay. So the understanding is, and I'm just going to read, of course, who's been appointed. You've got judges Monica Liu, Kathleen Satchwell, Patrick Doos, and there's a Rear Admiral from the South African Navy. So what we're understanding is that in terms of the Department of Defense, there's only one individual, and that's the retired Rear Admiral. So the other three, or the other four, I beg your pardon, Doos, Satchwell, Liu, and Ngoepe, them not being employees of the Department of Defense kind of will allow for there to be a stopping for this inquiry to begin.
Well, it's certainly something that participants in the board or people who are subpoenaed to testify at the board could theoretically raise and take it further, maybe on review in the High Court. As I say, it would be preferable if the department could perhaps just clarify that position of the members and how they fit them into the wording of the specific section.
I guess, Advocate Greef, given the amount of inquiries that this country has obviously experienced and the frustration that comes from it, whether it's from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission or the current Madlanga Commission, the State Capture Commission, we're kind of scratching our heads because there hasn't really been supposed prosecutions. Now, we don't know if there's going to be prosecutions that are going to happen yet. Most likely it won't be. There will probably be a sense of accountability to the president to, of course, answer certain questions with regards to what we saw in this Brics naval exercise. But given that, of course, this is already seemingly difficult start to this inquiry, is there a sense of frustration from the South African National Defence Union side that here we are, it's an inquiry to really determine the truth, especially with regards to South Africa's Navy, and we've hit a bit of a snag in this regards?
No, there's no frustration from our side. There's just a real hope on our side, that things will be dealt with correctly and according to the law and openly, so that the public and everyone else can see exactly what transpired. As I said from the start, on your question previously, our only hope in this whole investigation is that the integrity of the SNDF is reestablished, and that discipline reigns supreme in the National Defence Force. And that's what we would like to see. So it's very important that these bodies that's created to investigate it are also above reproach, so that we can have a proper process. We understand that people are pessimistic given all the inquiries and what have you that's been going on in South Africa. But we do believe this is an opportunity where something can be properly investigated and proper and coherent findings and recommendations made.
Yeah. One final question, Advocate Greef. You speak about integrity. Last year, of course, we had South Africa and the M23 rebels that were currently happening. It left a sort of a bitter taste in the mouths of South Africans, and of course, major question marks on Minister Angie Motshekga. We now, of course, see these naval drills that have occurred, and where we are in terms of the integrity of the South African Defence Force, the Navy. How important is it? And you've mentioned it, that the truth comes out and that South Africa still has some sort of perfect standing, not only with Africa, but in the world. How does South Africa now need to make sure that whatever comes out of this inquiry, that there's no tail between the legs with regards to this country?
I think it's just a question of, establish the facts, what happened, and then see to it that the full force of the law comes down on those who might have transgressed the law. It might be that there's a finding that no law was transgressed or no order was disobeyed. It's entirely possible. I think at this stage one shouldn't speculate as to the outcome. I think the thing that we can ask for now is just let's have a proper investigation that's beyond reproach and get all the facts together and then take it from there.
Advocate Pikkie Greef, absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That's Advocate Pikkie Greef from the South African National Defence Union. I think one of the most important aspects of this is that you've got the president, you've got a member of cabinet. There's many reports that are going, and I think the important part of this inquiry and what's going to be very important is that some sort of clarity and accountability. Now, I want to mention the word accountability because accountability is supposedly the major aspect of this. When we look at the South African government, when we look at, public office bearers for that matter, you speak to any citizen in this country, and one of the things that they always ask is, where's the accountability from those who have taken an oath of office? And the Defense Department, the Defense Ministry is a really important portfolio within our country because it defends the rights of us here in South Africa. It is the bastion of protecting us from any invasion, from any intrusion, from anyone that is threatening the national security of our country. And I guess for Minister Angie Motshekga, her position has really had this huge question mark over her for the last 1 year, especially what we saw just a year ago in the Democratic Republic of Congo with regards to the M23 rebels that, of course, have been backed by Rwanda. There was a sort of diplomatic spat that happened between us and Rwanda. And South Africa held themselves quite high with regards to dealing with Rwanda. But this is a different case altogether because it, of course, involves BRICS nations. And South Africa have every right to go ahead and conduct naval drills with who they want. But given that it was done with Iran, which at this very moment is seemingly at odds with the United States, I'm using a very mild word to describe that, there could be a potential conflict between Washington and Tehran. President Cyril Ramaphosa, again, if we are to read, the reports, the sort of comings from government, did not want South Africa's Navy to be involved with Iran, given the frosty relationships between Washington and Pretoria. He absolutely did not want this to happen. He did not want this to blow out of control. And hence, for that reason, and this inquiry is obviously going to go ahead and really determine the truth. But if we are to take it from the president's side, it was a good move to say, Iran, stay back from this, given what we are seeing right now. And of course, I had that conversation earlier on with Dr. Makubela, with South Africa expelling the Charge d'Affaires of Israel. It's another sort of element that comes in terms of South Africa's relationship, or non-existent relationship, with the United States of America. And of course, the appropriations bill coming out this week, where potentially AGOA is all but dead for South Africa. This inquiry is going to be very important. My take on this is that if it is found that Minister Angie Motshekga disobeyed President Cyril Ramaphosa, what does the president do? Given that this was a direct order coming from the commander-in-chief. The Constitution enshrines President Ramaphosa to be the commander-in-chief of South Africa's Navy and military. And if there was a sort of disobeying of the command, citizens are going to say, Mr. President, fire the minister for disobeying your command. But is that going to happen? Time will tell. Well, that's all we have for you here on News in Focus from myself, Faraz Patel, and the rest of the team in Johannesburg. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.